My name's Hannah Williams, and this is my lifespan timeline presentation for KINE 372. Who is Hannah Williams? I was born on August 9th of 2001, which makes me 23 years old. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, with my two older brothers who are 12 and 13 years older than I am. My mom decided after they moved out, it'd be smarter to move us closer to family because it was just me and her. So at 7, we moved to Michigan. I did competitive gymnastics from ages 7 to 18. And since then, I've been very active in the gym at least 3 to 4 times a week. I coached gymnastics for 5 years, and since I've worked at Hooters in Saginaw for 2.5 years as a server and bartender and trainer. In May of 2025, in about 3 weeks, I will graduate from SVSU with the Bachelor's of Science in Exercise Science. I would love to be a physical therapist who specializes in either orthopedics, sports specifically, or pediatrics. I would specifically like to work with student athletes specifically, so anywhere from like middle school age to college, I think would be super fun. I've been around sports or kids my entire life, whether that be me doing gymnastics, me coaching it, um, and things like that. Up until recently, I have a job where I don't work with either of those primarily, but I know that I would love to have a career where that trend continues. So moving on to infancy and toddlerhood, the first reflective movement I'm going to talk about is the moral reflex. This is a reflex seen in children where they react to a feeling that they are falling. Typically, the infant will be semi-reclined and they'll extend their arms and flex them towards their body when they get that sensation as if they are falling. This is typically seen at birth, and my onset, according to my mom, was also at birth. For voluntary movements, we have sitting without support, so sitting up without any external back or trunk support. Typically seen around 8 months, and my mom said my onset was around 7 months. As you can see to the left, this is a picture of me around 6 or 7 months. Sitting up by myself, there's nothing around my trunk or my back that's helping me sit up. It's all independent. Moving on to two more reflexes. We have the palmar grasp reflex, which is a primitive reflex where an infant will grasp an object with their hands or their fingers when it's placed in their palm. Typically seen at birth, and my onset was also at birth. I didn't have any photos that really could show this of me around that age. However, this to the picture to the right is me around my first birthday opening presents with my mom. And as you can see, my fingers are kind of wrapped around the wrapping paper, and I feel like this was the best photo to kind of demonstrate that reflex. For voluntary movements, we have crawling. So this is a way that infants move throughout their environment. They keep their bellies on the ground and use their arms and legs for partial support. A typical onset is seen around 8 months, while mine was around 7 to 8 months. So around the same time. An interesting fact, I didn't really crawl or creep, so to speak, more crawling than anything. My mom said I rolled everywhere. She thinks it was a sensory issue, especially with creeping. Um, I didn't like the feeling, especially carpet on my knees or things like that. So I pretty much rolled everywhere, and she has told me that fact my entire life. So I also think that's a little funny. All right, so the last slide for infancy and toddlerhood, we're going to talk about the parachute reflex and then cruising. The parachute reflex is going to be a postural reflex where an infant will extend their arms forward as if they're going to break their fall, as if they were falling when they're tilted forward suddenly. Typical onset is around 6 to 9 months, while mine was around 6 to 7 months. Voluntary movements are going to be cruising. This is where an infant is up and walking. However, they're using couches or other objects for support to help them move around. This is seen around 10 months. My onset was around 9 months, according to my mom. I don't have a picture, unfortunately, I'm at around that age that shows me cruising properly or demonstrating the parachute reflex. However, there is a picture on the left of me around 2 or 3 years old, standing up by myself. Kind of just imagine that, but if there was a couch in front of me, I would be using that to help me move around a little bit more. All right, moving on to childhood. So the first foundational skill we're going to talk about is running. Similar to walking, there's just a brief flight phase that's introduced with running. So running is going to be considered mature when a child can demonstrate a bunch of things. You're going to have a slight forward lean throughout their stride, which if we look up at the top, we can see that his body is slightly tilted forward. Arms are going to swing opposite of legs with the elbows flexed at 90. Support knee should flex slightly after foot contact. Forceful extension of the support leg through the ankle, knee, and hip to drive the body forward and up into the flight phase. This can kind of be seen during like the takeoff and the initial swing. You can kind of see that he's pushing through his hips, his knees, his ankle to really put his body up into that flight phase. Lastly, the recovery knee should lift high and the lower leg should flex to bring the heel close to the butt. That's kind of seen in the mid swing and then the terminal swing. Next foundational skills we're going to talk about are jumping and galloping. Galloping is going to be, or I'm sorry, jumping, lifting the body into the air using force produced by one or both legs. Picture to the right is going to demonstrate jumping. This is going to be mature when there is a presence of a prep phase or a prep crouch with flexion at the hips, knees, and ankles. That can be seen in the first picture to the right, or yes. Arms should swing down during the prep phase, which is going to be that first picture where they are going to lift to help produce force during the jump, which can be seen on the second picture. The ability to adjust the trunk angle depending on whether you're jumping for height, so vertically, or distance, horizontally. Symmetrical leg movements with increased force, and jump distance should also increase as the individual grows and gets bigger. Um, so 3 to 5 inches a year for jump distance, and height should be 2 inches per year during elementary school. Galloping, a step forward on one foot, followed by a leap with the other foot. This is going to be mature when the movement is smooth and fluid. The trail leg should land next to or slightly behind the lead leg, and feet should stay close to the ground. Knees should stay slightly flexed to allow for flexibility, and the individual should be able to lead with either leg. They should be able to gallop with either their right or their left foot in the front. After learning jumping, galloping, and running, I was able to learn the complex skill of gymnastics. So for gymnastics, there's a bunch of different practices that you can use. I don't think the sport is like a one size fits all for practice strategies and methods. For me specifically, variable practice works best for a lot of things. Blocked practice specifically is good for single skills when you're trying to master a cartwheel, a handstand, a back tuck, things like that. Doing the same skill over and over again the same way, I think, is the best way to learn a singular skill. You're not typically going to learn it doing it different ways, so to speak, most of the time. Um, but doing it the same way over and over and over again, unless there's a slight correction, is definitely the best way to learn single skills. For serial practice, um, those are going to be, it's going to be best used for routines. So doing the same skills in the same order every single time. Um, Good for meet season. Routines are never really going to change most of the time, unless like something happens and you have to you're switching skills out or something. Um, you're still going to do the same thing over and over and over again in the same order every single time. So those are going to be best when you're putting skills together and you're getting ready to perform them. For part practice, um, segmentation and simplification are used a lot in gymnastics. Segmentation is good when you're trying to teach somebody a routine. So breaking the routine up into sections can help an individual learn the dance moves and that kind of stuff, and eventually be able to move on to the next section and ultimately put it all together. Simplification, however, is good for when you're trying to build upon skills. You wouldn't put a handstand on the bar before you had it on the floor. You wouldn't do a cartwheel on the beam before you could do it on the floor. So many skills are like this in gymnastics where they have easier versions that the athlete has to practice and master first before moving on and learning and mastering the harder ones. So being able to break it down like that is super convenient and used a lot in gymnastics. All right, so adulthood. The longevity game score gave me an 87. So from 23 to 30, I want to stay consistent with exercise, keep up with proper nutrition and diet because I do have hypertension. I take lisinopril, so I also want to be keeping up with taking that medication and making sure I stay as healthy as possible. From 40 to 50, I want to use the knowledge I got from PT school and in my career thus far to use for my own personal benefit. Um, I want to continue exercising, aerobic training at least 5 to 7 days a week, resistance training at least 2 to 3 days a week. This is what ACSM recommends for primary hypertension, which I have. And lastly, I want to continue taking my lisinopril or any other medication that I'm on at that time um, to keep my blood pressure controlled and keep me healthy. Moving on to the 60s and 70s, I want to retire as a physical therapist, but continue keeping up with exercise, at least walking, depending on how much I'm moving around and how well I'm moving around at this time. Um, at least 3 to 4 times a week for sure. And I want to find new hobbies to keep up with my cognitive skills. I do a lot of puzzles and play games right now. So I want to keep up finding new hobbies, whether that be knitting, finding new puzzles, still doing board games, things like that. And lastly, 80 to 90, I want to move as much as possible. Movement can be hard for individuals at this age, so whatever the movement is, I want to be doing it, whether it's swimming, gardening, housework, I want to be up and moving. I want to spend as much time as I can with my friends and family, and I want to keep up with the hobbies that I've picked up over the years. So, in conclusion, infancy and toddlerhood, I developed and learned a lot of reflexes. For reflective movements, I had the Moro reflex, the palmar grass reflex, and the parachute reflex. Voluntary movements were sitting without support, crawling, and cruising. During my childhood, I learned the foundational skills of running, jumping, and galloping before eventually moving on and developing gymnastics as my complex skill. During adulthood, I want to stay consistent with proper exercise and diet. I want to become a physical therapist and eventually retire and use all that information and knowledge that I've gained throughout school and my career to benefit myself. And lastly, I want to find new hobbies and keep up with them throughout the rest of my life. And that's it. Thanks for watching.